Hello and welcome to my podcast, Nutrition Life Stories. My name is Caroline Peyton. I'm a nutritionist and naturopath and passionate sharer of the power of nutrition. I want to reconnect people to the love of food, its sense of community, but above all else, its ability to nourish and heal the body. Today, I'm really delighted that I have a guest with me who's fairly local to me, lives on the outskirts of Swindon, Jon Cook. So I'm really pleased he had some time with his busy schedule. You'll understand in a moment why. Thank you so much for taking part in my podcast, Jon, and coming on as a guest. I'm looking forward to our chat today. Do you want to say a bit more about yourself?
Okay, yeah, I'm 52. I'm a fourth generation dairy farmer on this farm. I've grown up just knowing cows. I did 2 years out in an office, which virtually killed me. But well, as we go into my story, we'll see how my life has changed in the last decade.
Yes, and your farm is outside Swindon in Peyton, isn't it?
Yep, that's right.
Called Dora's Dairy.
Dora's Dairy, yeah, named after one of the first calves we ever reared. For
one of the ones you reared when you got back into farming. So you grew up on this farm, I believe.
I did, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How lovely, how idyllic that sounds, really.
In hindsight, it was. Two sisters, and yeah, we played pretty hard. Yeah. We had a great childhood, yeah.
But all that fresh air and freedom and running around and lack of pollution, idyllic. And as someone like me who specializes in gut health, what we understand about farming and the being with the animals and the soil is so good for our gut health, actually.
Yes.
We know about that today. So you grew up there. Did you, was it, I don't like to be stereotypical, but was your mum really into cooking, or maybe it was your dad? Or?
They were very, very defined roles. Dad did the farm, mum did the kids, and mum helped dad where she could. But yes, we ate in the middle of the day and we all ate together, and it was always a cooked meal and less cooked at night, but more of a snack at night. But yes, we had our big family meal in the middle of the day.
Right. So you came home from school to have your cooked lunch?
Yeah, mum used to pick us up, bring us home.
Very traditional sort of foods, I imagine you were eating.
Yeah, very much. My dad was very traditional. Always meat and always a couple of veg with it.
And always pudding. Well, yeah, but home cooked pudding is very different to a lot of the shop bought stuff, isn't it? Did you have some favourites?
My mum used to do blancmange, but it was like the chocolate blancmange. And you used to get it in a packet. And you can still get it in a packet. I had to buy some for Amazon. And yeah, so I don't think that was very home cooked. just our milk.
But I imagine you were using your own milk on that, weren't you?
Correct.
Straight from the cows and completely fresh.
It was.
And were you healthy growing up, Jon?
Yeah, we were never ill. My sister is very proud of the fact that she never had a day off school. If we had colds, they of course we had illnesses, of course we did, but we got over them very quickly. It never lasted very long. Anything gastric lasted 24 hours. And I mean, I used to love taking time off school because I wanted to help dad on the farm. In reality, we were never ill. I'd never broken a bone. I'm touching wood as we see. I've never broken a bone, nor of my sisters. And I know that when I went to the dentist, one of the first times I had an X-ray, one of the things they said was they can't believe how dense my jaw was, the bone in my jaw.
What sort of age would you have been to have an X-ray?
Well, it was in my 20s. I remember them saying when we changed to a dentist, and it was remarked on how dense my jawbone was. And I can only put that down to raw milk, availability of all the minerals I needed to form a really healthy skeleton.
And when your dad was farming, was the milk sold on as raw milk then, or was it sent off?
No, it was sent off to, well, when I was a child, St. Ivel.
Oh, yes.
You speak Yorkshire in Wooden Bassett.
Wooden Bassett, yes.
All very local, or later on it went down to the creamery at Latton near Cricklade. So it's always been relatively local. It's only been in more recent years that it started to get sent off a lot further.
Okay.
So Hatfield, Peveril. I ended up having a contract with Cadbury, so my milk used to go into dairy milk, and that was quite a good contract. But it was ridiculous how far the milk used to travel.
Such a shame, really. But I guess everything's become bigger, isn't it? Bigger companies, and therefore things have to travel further. Yeah. You mentioned, though, that you ended up going into work in an office, but you love being on the farm. How on earth did that come about?
Well, 17 years old, and thinking that I knew better and wanted to do better things and be better. And I thought, well, my dad didn't want me to go farming anyway. He always said, don't come farming. It's too hard. You never have time off. He said, get somebody else to pay your pension and have some time off and go on holiday whenever you like. So I tried it and it's just hideous. I couldn't cope with that at all. I can't do politics. I'm very bad at politics. Office politics don't mix. So I always, if you're working for somebody, you should be working for somebody, not taking your department of any business as being your department and everybody else as an enemy. That I couldn't cope with that. So
you don't need to name names. You're part of a big organisation then.
No, it's quite small.
Oh,
no, I think that probably made it worse. There's lots of in-department politics, which I couldn't cope with. No. Anyway,
and being inside all day long instead of being outside in the fresh air and getting the exercise, you must have been stir crazy by the end of each working day or both my day.
I used to come back, even though I didn't live at the farm at the time. I moved out. I actually I used to come back here every day. Yeah, it's like an umbilicus cord that was getting stretched, and I needed to come back. I suppose I was earthing, wasn't I? Was
it after those 2 years that you were like, Dad, can I come back?
I set up other businesses. I was a worm farmer for quite a few years. I grew worms for the fishing market and composting market, and then I couldn't keep up with what I was selling, so I then started importing. I was importing them from Holland.
So you did something completely different then.
It was alongside. I had people working for me to do lots of that, and I still like working on the farm as well. I've always worked on the farm. You can't. If you're on site, you're working on the farm.
Yes. So you were doing that on the farm in Peyton, but you had your own business there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've subsequently I did other things. I was a dairy consultant for a very short while. And I've also had a dog tag business since 2006, I think. Gosh. So we do dog tags too.
Well, that's a bit different to me.
Yeah, totally.
But so at what point did you rejoin the main part of the farm then and get involved with that?
My dad died in 2012. For about 6 months before that, it's clear that he wasn't going to be able to cope. So then I just took over. Then that was the turning point, if you like. So my dad was still very fit up until that point, and he was coping quite well on his own. So, although with my additional help, but not too managerial, if you like. And then he got esophageal cancer. 6 months later, he died, and so I took over.
Right. So, so at that point in time, you just continued the farm as it was, did you? And you made changes later on.
Yeah, and it's 4 years after he died. I'd always had a passion for wanting to connect with the customer rather than just sell to one customer, being Cadbury or Unigate or Dairy Crest, whoever we were with at the time. We always had very good quality milk. We always won awards for our milk, even when my dad was alive. I've got photos and trophies from 30 years ago when we had really good quality milk. So I knew we had an absolute belter of a product. My father didn't he was very much of the era you don't like people with clipboards, and it was because to sell milk raw, obviously there's lots of hurdles I have to jump through on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And he hated people with clipboards meddling in his business, coming in and telling him what to do. He didn't like being told what to do, and I'm actually the same. But to be able to connect with my customer and sell what I wanted to sell, I had to jump through those hoops. So for me, it was a natural progression. And we also changed our farming principles as well. We pretty much did the worst thing you can do and change everything at the same time. So we went from producing 1,400 litres of milk a day to, now we're just over 100 litres a day.
Goodness me.
We're on quite a low at the moment for various reasons. And obviously they wouldn't send a milk tanker in to collect 100 litres. It was just not viable to do. So we had this transition period where they started to get really annoyed with me, but I didn't have it. I was selling raw milk, but they didn't want anything, because all these companies don't want anything to do with anything. If you say raw milk, everybody just takes a breath. God, that's got to be inherently dangerous, hasn't it? And even down to like the farm assurance scheme that I was in. So when we were in the scheme, we weren't allowed to put a rad tractor symbol on our raw milk. They forbid it. even though we passed all of their criteria to be farm assured, we weren't allowed to put it on raw milk.
They didn't want to be associated with it at all.
Just because there's so many negative connotations to raw milk.
But just going back then, what made that decision? Well, how did you move then from the traditional farming milk production you did? You said you wanted to be more connected with your customers, but there must have been something about the raw milk that you wanted to go that way.
Purely on health.
And because what you did some research, or you're going back to your own childhood, or what was that?
Both, yeah. I started realizing, well, I think what we first started to do was looking at selling milk directly from the farm with a vending machine.
Yes.
I like talking to people. I like talking to my customers, and it made sense to have people come on farm and actually enjoy the product firsthand. So initially, we were just looking at a vending machine, and then when I realized I could sell raw with a license, and I knew how good our health had been through our childhood, it made perfect sense to do it. Yeah. So it was an easy choice to make, and I think it almost just happened really quite quickly. We decided that was what we wanted to do. At the time, there was no organisation for raw milk producers, or which we subsequently set up. So we had to find all of this out ourselves, and it was a learning curve, a steep learning curve, because there was no central place to get any information from. So you had to keep picking whether you need to speak to the Food Standards Agency, the ones that license us, and then your environmental health officer that has jurisdiction after the tank, into like the vending machine, and then trying to get all the testing in place, and there was lots and lots to learn.
I can imagine some huge hurdles to overcome.
Huge, yeah. I mean, we subsequently set up the Raw Milk Producers Association. People I'm a founding director, but we just realised that there was just nowhere for anybody to go, and everybody's asking like the same questions: where do I go for this? Where do I go for that? And we were seeing it on social media. So our chairman, Johnny Crickmore, who is Fen Farm, he does some amazing cheeses and milk and skier and all sorts of other things. He got us. He sent a letter to all the raw milk producers in the country, because there was a list of us, and we all met up and decided to form an organisation to help people like us start, but also become cleaner and get this. I'll send you a link. So raw milk's very, very important for a lot of people. A lot of my customers can't survive without it, and so we've also set up a supporters group for raw milk, because they, and I say they, Pharma, Fake Food, don't like us doing what we're doing. Because we make people healthy. And our food isn't addictive in the same way their food is addictive. So where there's a raw milk producer that's a customer has found raw milk juice and realised that they're healthy on our milk, they never go back. They don't need to go back to the doctor for their eczema cream, for their asthma inhalers, and or their IBS treatments, and they suddenly go, oh, we don't need all that. And it doesn't sound like much, but actually, when you start adding up all the people that are coming to me that would have been having the creams and the inhalers and the, I don't know, whatever stuff you take for IBS, it's going to start cutting into their profits.
I know a little bit about the benefits of raw milk, but obviously you know far more than me. You're selling this and you did your own research or whatever. So just so people understand, because people are a bit like, oh, raw milk, that sounds a bit like, oh, it sounds a bit dodgy or a bit dangerous, or it's not very clean. Do you want to describe what the benefits are, potential benefits?
That's one of the things I always forget to do, to actually explain what raw milk is, because I'm with inside the wood.
Exactly.
So raw milk is milk straight from the cow. All I do is I clean the teats, I test the milk visually, and then I milk it. I put it through 2 filters and into a cooling tank, and then it's cool. And that's all I do with it. The important thing with any raw product is how it's produced. So the health of the cow is paramount. Pressure that cow is under is paramount too. So raw milk to be pasteurized and raw milk to be for raw drinking milk consumption is almost a completely different product. The standards I have to conform to are completely different from a conventional farm, if you like. And what we're producing actually is quite different. So my emphasis is on cow health, and if the cows are healthy, the milk is inherently healthy too. So I milk once a day. I don't feed any cereal. So a cow is designed to eat grass, ligneous materials. She's not designed to eat cereals and maize and all other sorts of waste materials that I've used in the past to raise yields. The problem is it changes the pH of the cow and it changes their physiology. Is that the right word? And so the milk then it's not as healthy. So, and I'm going to say things which will probably get me into trouble, but you can put certain pathogens into raw milk, and the raw milk bacteria, because it's so biologically active, will outperform the bad bacteria. Right. E. coli is a classic one. We always think about E. coli. E. coli in raw milk virtually is outcompeted very, very, very quickly. So it kind of dies off. And they've done some tests with salmonella and other stuff. There's certain things which you won't, like listeria and things like that. But as long as the cows are inherently healthy and are not stressed, the milk is inherently healthy, and it's got its own pathogen inhibitors in it.
And I think I read on your site your cows live out about, is that 9 months a year? Is that right? That's a long time, isn't it? On grass, that makes such a difference. That for the stress.
Yeah, last year it wasn't 9 months because we had that awful winter. But the other thing I do, their winter housing is polytunnels.
Oh, really?
So they're effectively outside, inside.
Well, that's amazing.
All year. On a dull day, it's lighter inside the tunnels than it is out. It's quite amazing. So when it comes,
what are they fed on? What are they fed on at that time?
Hay and silage, just grass, preserved grass. That's all. That's all.
And they've got quite a lot of room to move around in those polytunnels.
Yep.
Yeah. So hence no stress or low stress or whatever.
Yes. But they also keep cows and calves together, which is also a low stress system. Yeah. So we will keep them together for at least 4 months, which is commercial suicide because that's when all the milk's produced. When a calf gets to about 4 months old, that calf will take all of the milk. I don't even bother to milk them. And then when I wean them off, then I start milking the cow again. And sometimes she gives me some and sometimes she won't. But that feels right in my head. Yeah. That feels right for the...
ethically correct approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things I used to hate before, because we were what was called a flying herd, where we would only buy cows that had already calved, and then every single calf they had would just go to market after 4 to 6 weeks. And I really struggled with the separation, the anxiety, the noise that the mothers made. I couldn't sleep. It basically meant I couldn't sleep. The noise that the cows make when they've lost their calf and they can't see their calf, other than the noise they make when they're at the other side of the gate and they can still see it and still touch it, but it just can't suckle them, is a completely different noise. Yeah. I can sleep through that because it's just like, you're the wrong side of the gate, you fool, rather than I can't find my baby, which is complete. Yes. It's a real stress. And so I'm not going to rubbish commercial farmers because they are producing food for a market.
Exactly.
And when you hear about calves being snatched straight away from their mothers, that's the least stress way of doing it. It's actually least stress for the calf, least stress for the mother. Mother doesn't bond, the calf.
They haven't formed a bond.
And it just thinks that you're the one that's feeding it, and it just grows up like that. And actually, a lot of the really the bigger farms, their calves are micromanaged. I mean, they are so well looked after for their physical needs. They're putting this in an individual crate, which everybody thinks is cruel. But that farmer will know whether that calf has drunk that milk, how much milk it's drinking, and when it gets to a certain level, then it go into a pen with 3 or 5 calves, and then it'll just keep progressing up. So it has to be strong before it can progress to the next stage. So I don't know how much my calves drink. I don't have a clue. I'm assuming they're getting enough because they have free access to it.
Yes. It's like breastfeeding, isn't it, with humans, babies? Yeah.
So they're on demand, and they demand what they want, and if there's anything left, I get it.
Hopefully so you've got the ethical management of the cows, which is wonderful, and then it is going back to that raw milk. So because you mentioned about the grass, and then that it helps to increase the fatty acid profile, doesn't it, and more of the omega-3 levels, that if they're on a grain cereal, they're not going to get that at all. So there is
omega-3 and 6 mix is wrong. The ratio is wrong. On the 3, just on grass is right. This one is a complete food that you can live on. And I have some of my customers that do this. They do it for a month at a time. They call it the Go Mad diet, gallon of milk a day, Go Mad. And bodybuilders will use it as well.
Yeah.
So raw milk is designed to grow a baby mammal. So it helps with your muscle growth, and because it's all biologically available, and if the cow is healthy, everything is in the right balance: minerals, vitamins, proteins, fats. Your body has to do no work to digest it.
Yes.
It basically house digest itself. So
it's a natural food that the digestive system will recognize, because it recognizes everything that's there, because it's in its purest form as it should be by nature.
Exactly. So pasteurized milk has been cooked. All the enzymes you need to digest that milk have been destroyed. So people think they're lactose intolerant, which they are, because they don't produce the lactase enzyme. Well, lactase enzyme is in raw milk.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of lactose intolerant people that come for my milk because they can digest it. One of my customers came to me and said, do you have any A2 cows? I don't know if you know anything about A1, A2 protein.
I do know a bit. Is it Guernsey cows that are a bit more A2?
Yeah, absolutely. So the commercial herd, the national herd, is mainly black and whites, Holsteins. We've been breeding them to have really big engines, and the more food they can take in, the more they can express. And inadvertently, we've bred out the A2 gene. So the old breeds like the Guernsey, the Jersey, the Shorthorn, those are inherently A2, about 80%, but in varying, I think Guernseys are higher than Jerseys. But this person came to me and said, do you have any A2 milk? And we're like, really embarrassingly, as a dairy farm, I didn't know anything about it. So she said, can I buy you a cow and you milk it for me? And I went, no, because I didn't want to have anybody else controlling what I did. So I said, I'll just go. I went and bought 5 A2 cows, which I knew were A2, and we milked those first in the system. We took that milk out separately. She had that milk and was very happy. So we were finding that when people came to us and said, I'm lactose intolerant, we'd give them the raw milk from our tank, and they would say, oh no, I still can't digest it. And we say, hold on a minute then, try this. And they were protein intolerant. They couldn't take the A1 protein.
Yeah.
And it's just like a revelation. The eczema just like cleared up, and it was just like, wow, I can't believe it. So since that day, we breed everything we breed is to A2 cows. So we are classed as an A2 dairy now.
So it's a protein. So people understand that the difference here is that sometimes it's a lactose, which is the milk sugar. Like you say, the enzyme that we should have is lactase, but we tend to lack it as adults anyway. Hence our bacteria, lactic acid bacteria, can break it down. But raw milk has that enzyme that is lost through the heat treatment through pasteurization. Then the other problem for certain people is the casein, isn't it? It's the protein. Hence the A2 milk, the protein's different and is more well tolerated for individuals.
It's quite frustrating for a raw milk farmer when you see somebody says, oh, I've been told to give up dairy.
Yes.
Yeah, you've got to give up pasteurized dairy.
Do that first.
And you try.
People don't know where to go, and it's lucky for people like me living in this area near Swindon can direct people to you, because you can freeze it, can't you, John?
Yeah. I got.
It doesn't need to be fresh. It freezes well. It retains all its properties once it's been frozen, which is just perfect. And some of the research, and like you were talking about eczema, asthma, are there any other conditions or symptoms that people have? You mentioned, of course, about IBS because of the potential intolerances, but anything else, or just generally from a health point of view that
so they are
to you?
They're the big ones.
Yeah.
That when people come to the end of the road with eczema and asthma, they've read a snippet somewhere, probably not on Google because it won't come up on Google, but somewhere on the in some search engine that actually raw milk help them. They are the main ones, but there is some research to say they help with allergies, hay fever being one of them. All of this is anecdotal. I have no scientific basis to say.
But I look at research a lot through the work I do. So I found there is some research. I've seen some on PubMed, which is one of the major sites you can go to for research studies. And I did find some research studies around, one was November 23, actually, that did a big what we call a meta-analysis, where it looks at the previous studies and pulls them all together. And it showed that, there's some really positive research out there. It may be limited, but there is positive research around raw milk and less asthma and allergies generally. So there is some, but like you say, there isn't loads of it. I'm used to that in the work I do from a nutrition point of view. You don't find endless research, but there can be research, and I did find some. So, I mean, yes, of course, anecdotal is very powerful.
We're not allowed to say that we can help.
No.
say it's anecdotal. We have the anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, and it can support. It may
Yeah.
help, of course.
Yes.
You've been on your own health journey. So you didn't start this from your own health point of view then, your raw milk journey. That was already started.
No.
You
I'm
mentioned
like every single farmer in the fact that we're really busy. We get on and do stuff. We know how to feed cows. We know how to manipulate the cow to produce the most amount of milk, completely ignoring our own. And
well,
you
like
see
many people
really unhealthy farmers around, blotchy red faces and great big bellies, and then
Yes.
stuffing cake and everything, and yet their cows are healthy and they're completely chronically inflamed. And it's
Yeah.
ironic that we know so much about cow nutrition and so little about our own.
Yes.
So one of my customers, a chap called Ian Vout, is a holistic practitioner. He's probably called himself something else. I can't remember what it is, but there's a link on my website to him. And he was kept on dropping seed bombs for me. He was very good. He didn't say, John, you're fat, you need to sort yourself out, which I was. And he was talking about his customers, and we would, because obviously he came for the raw milk because he knew the power of it. So I was immediately drawing as much information out of him as I could. And then he was talking about some of his clients that he did blood tests for. And I said, perhaps we ought to have one of those blood tests. And of course, that was just opened up the whole world of. So he would do his blood test. I think the first one I did was like 42 different markers. Because he would say, you can't look at your blood sugar or something in isolation. It needs to be the whole. You need to see the whole. So you're either inflamed, your cortisol levels or your resting enzymes. I don't even know what they are, half of them are. So he said, we'll do the test and we'll look at it. So I was diabetic. My HbA1c was 49. So I was over the limit. Very low vitamin D, which was a surprise because I'm outside all the time. But I suppose fair skin. I'd also had skin cancer 26, 27 years ago. So I was told, protect yourself from the sun. Completely opposite of what I should have done. And I got very high ferritin too, thing I knew nothing about at the time. So I was 18 stone. I was probably chronically inflamed. You need to give up the sugar. I was having 2 sugars in my tea and I was having 20 cups of tea a day. I was looking at that dopamine high. I was so addicted.
But also, if your blood sugar levels going up and down all day long, you're almost like you're keeping your blood sugar levels up by having more tea, which can act as a bit of a stimulant, and adding the sugar. And then so you've got this yo-yo effect going on all day.
All day. I would plan my day every 2 hours about where I was going to be so I could have food. And if I didn't have food in those 2 hours, I would take it with me because my brain was telling me you're in a crisis.
Yes, well, it would do. Yeah, because your blood sugar level would plummet.
My sugar crashes were so severe, I'd have to either sit down or lean against something.
Wow.
My head would glow.
Yeah.
And so he said, you need to give that up. So to start with, I went keto. So I gave up the sugar the next day, went keto.
Which is high fats.
I had a headache for 2 months where my body was trying to readjust itself. It was quite a painful period, I've got to be honest. And then the more I looked into it, I was following somebody called Professor Tim Noakes. I don't know if you've come across him. He's reverses type 2 diabetes. And he did a great presentation to the South African Beef Farmers Association. And everything started to click into place. Like our evolution, this is how we evolved. We all eat animal fat, animal protein, and we would have eaten carbohydrates in that very short period where they were available. So berries, this far north, in the northern hemisphere, berries would have been apples, any fruit would have been our carbohydrate. And I then read another book on vitamin D, Jeff Bowles, I think it was, and he did experiments with really high levels of vitamin D. But in the book, he explains that insulin is there to put fat into your cells. You've only got a certain amount of cells, and it will fill those fat cells from the carbohydrates. So the insulin is there during the summer, autumn time, when all of the fruits and the carbohydrates are available, ready for the lean period, which was going to come, which was going to be the winter. Prehistorically, our winters would have been a lot worse than they are. We don't have Tesco's all those years ago. So whatever we could catch, which would have been on 4 legs, 2 legs, or have feathers or fur on it, would have had to keep us going through that lean period. So he explains that you're actually going through a hibernation cycle, but you just don't actually hibernate because your availability for food during that period is limited. So the SAD syndrome, the seasonal adjustment disorder, is your body saying do less and eat more. I used to suffer with it quite badly. I don't suffer with it anymore. Now it all makes perfect sense. It's like somebody has pulled a handle. Like I watched Tim Noakes say that we evolved eating animal fat, animal protein, and only those insulin foods would have been in this summer and autumn. And then Jeff went and said that, and it's just like, oh God, it all makes sense. So I shouldn't be eating carbohydrates. I should only be eating stuff in season. I should only eat stuff that I've grown in my locality, not near the equator. I can't handle mangoes and oranges because the amount of fructose in those spikes my insulin and makes me fat. So then I started realizing, well, actually, the whole thing's a lie. So 5 a day, and I don't know whether you what you say, but 5 a day is in a marketing term. So you walk into the supermarket, and I used to do this, walk into the supermarket and get 5 because you needed 5 of these things. And they talk about a balanced diet. And if I say to most people, what's a balanced diet to you? Oh, nothing everything in moderation. Well, actually, that's not true for me. Absolutely not true for me. If I have carbs, I'm going to get fat. I put on weight. I get out of ketosis. I can't burn any fat. Another thing that Tim Noakes said to me, which really helped to put it into boy terms for me, which is what I needed, is like we're a dual fuel car. So we're electric and petrol. And you, in the morning, you have your breakfast, which is the same as having your battery plugged in overnight. So you've got a full tank. You go off and you drive 200 miles. You look at your tank. You go, oh, we're about half full. You say, oh yeah, it's back lunchtime. I'll have a meal deal. So you have your sandwich and your chocolate bar, and you look back at your gauge and you're full again. And then so your electric's full back up again. So you do another 200 miles. You get home. I thought, well, I better plug my battery in because it's half again. So you plug it in. That's your evening meal with your sweet. So the reality is you never turn the petrol engine on. All of that fat that you've been storing, because you've got excess electric, puts it into fat, you never turn the fat engine on. I was having excess calories, excess energy, which I was putting into my fat cells, and never ever turning on that fat burner.
The problem most people have is the snacking. The snacking is the problem.
If you want to be the size of a...
We can eat, in my view, we're all different, but we can eat. I'm a believer more of eating 3 meals a day, but you mustn't snack. And that's where people's downfall is. They're just snacking constantly. When you don't snack and you've got long periods in between, it enables us to burn fat. And that's what you're seeing. It doesn't necessarily mean we're all different, but I tend to, for the majority of people, sort of to keep it simple, is saying, have breakfast, have lunch for dinner. If you're not a breakfast eater, skip the breakfast, have your lunch, have your dinner, but you have to stop the snacking. And I'm a firm believer, you have to stop the snacking. You have to have a minimum of a 12-hour fast overnight. Absolutely critical. And some people have a longer fast and that suits them, but remembering we're all slightly unique and need something slightly different.
The other thing I did was a DNA test to find out where my heritage lies, because I think that's really important too. You're born, if your genes are near to the equator, then the way you look at the way your body burns sugar is completely different. The carbohydrates are burnt differently. I'm very much where my ancestors come from. So I can't eat all those high fructose foods.
Well, we shouldn't be eating them. You talked about 5 a day. I mean, because I specialize in gut health and feeding the gut microbiome critical, I talk about 10 a day, but I'm very much around, this should be coming from your non-starchy, mostly above ground vegetables, generally. And we're not talking here about the fruit. If it is fruit, it should be berries. It should be small traditional apples, potentially, maybe a plum in season. They're low sugar. But this whole, like you say, the 5 a day as a marketing term is definitely what food manufacturers will use to sell an orange juice, or that with all that sugar is just orange terrible.
Too. Bananas are so got
stuff. I know. And again, I talk a lot about this and grapes, and and it's a real eye opener for people when you start to equate how much sugar there is in fruit. It's a real problem. And again, some of the starchy, like parsnips, potatoes, the starch equals sugar. Starch equals sugar. That's where you have to be really careful. But I like the vegetables feeding the gut microbiome, and I see it because of the research I do around the need to do that. But then again, recognizing we are all different and our needs as well.
So meat suits me. Meat suits me very, very, very well. And I went from eating every 2 hours to eating once a day.
Right.
So I was having 23-hour fasts, and that absolutely suited me. I lost 5 stone in 6 months.
And your energy, I assume, energy level is
my energy went up, my brain fog disappeared. I mean, I didn't have any other major issues that I knew about, but just basically feeling much, much better because I'm lighter. My weight doesn't fluctuate very much anymore. Yeah, and I now allow myself to fall off the wagon every now and then. I don't tend to have sugar. I made the mistake of, we make ice cream here as well. I made the mistake of trying some toffee ice cream, and it was so good that I ate half a litre of it.
Ooh.
I had a migraine 2 hours later. That took me a week for my system to forgive me. That really, it was just like somebody had smacked me around the head.
I was going to say, it must have been like, not the migraine, I was thinking like a brain fog type feeling as well.
Yes, yeah, it was absolutely. It was awful. And it was just like being drunk and having a really bad hangover. And I remember how that feels. So I'm never going to do that again.
So you've done it, you've taken it. And how long ago did you embark on this journey, this health journey?
That's about 5 years ago now.
So, and that's what you've maintained ever since.
Yeah.
And it's quite very drastic, and but look at the difference for you.
I'll send you a picture of how fat I was, and people don't even recognize when they see the image. I've got it saved to my favorites on my phone, so I show people.
Remind yourself.
This was me 6 years ago, and I was like, wow.
But it's not just the way you look; it's the way you feel as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And your job is so active. You need that energy, but then we all need energy to fuel the brain, whether we're sitting at a desk or working in an office. We've got to be fueling the brain, but fueling it in the right way.
I mean, I was carrying a lot of excess weight that I was never burning off.
No.
And then I'm quite happy with the little bit I've got. I'm not going to say I'm a perfect shape or anything like that, but my body feels right now. I'm the same size I was when I was 20. We shouldn't be changing too much, really. And it was an interesting process, because after I did that for myself, that was when I took the cows off the cereals too. I stopped. So I went through my transformation, and
they went through theirs.
Well, yeah, they did, and they didn't like it. They really not rebelled. They hated me for about 6 months.
What way? How?
They would come up in the yard and bawl in my face. They wouldn't come into the milking parlour. It was like having 100 very naughty autistic children that just wanted to make a lot of noise and piss you off as much as they could. And it nearly broke me. And when you're used to cows fighting to come into the milking parlour because they were going to get a dopamine high from all the cereals I was feeding them, to be in the other end of the yard looking out over the field saying, we just want to go out there, we don't want anything to do with you at all. When I had the cow called Shannon, she would just come up into my face and bawl in my face. Where's my drugs? Very strange time. But I knew the pain that they were going through, because I went through it the year before. So I knew what they were going through. So I stuck with it, knowing they could come out the other end of it. And now I don't have any problems at all. And when you're milking, it used to be that they would, because I had hoppers above where they were milking, the feeders, and so I could just use a shovel and shovel into them. They would bang with their heads, the same as when they used to bang their mothers to get more milk down, because if they banged it hard enough, it would just shake over the lip, and they would get a few tiny little nuggets, 2 or 3 little nuggets. That's all they'd get. That was worthy of the energy to get it. And then I realized they were completely addicted, like I was.
Yes.
I mean, I've been feeding my dogs raw for 20 odd years. They just eat chicken carcasses, basically. I'm very lucky they can forage all day if they need extra, so I don't need to maybe balance it. I don't take my dogs to the vets. They don't need to go to the vets. They never have digestive. I mean, a pet that's got diabetes is just like, dogs should never get diabetes. Cats should never get diabetes, because it's only because they're being fed wheat, sweet potato, and all stuff that they wouldn't naturally eat. And so it made perfect sense for me to change everything on there. But actually, just a big realization that I've been doing it wrong myself for so many years, and been doing it. I'm not saying I was doing it wrong for them, because that's what we were told to do. That was, modern science was very clever, and we can manipulate these cows' diets and give you all this milk, which and the result from that was milk just gets cheaper, farms get pushed more, cows get pushed more, land gets pushed more. Consumer thinks they get,
and everyone's unhealthy and unhappy.
Precisely, yeah. And I was producing food to make people unhealthy, which was a horrible thought, really. And so I completely turned everything around now.
And now now it's wonderful what you do. You've got a happy herd, and you're healthy and happy, and your customers are healthy and happy too. So
I can't stop what I'm doing because they're unhealthy without my food.
Really interesting story from what you've gone through yourself, but also with the herd and changing things around. How can people find out more about you and your farm and find you?
dorasdairy.co.uk. And at the moment, we don't have much milk, so please don't turn up thinking you're going to get any. Because
You put this on your website, though, don't you, John? Or on your Facebook page?
That's more up to date.
So your Dora's Dairy is your Facebook page too.
Yeah, Dora's Dairy.
Up to date with the status of milk. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, John. Really interesting. Thank you for your time today. We're hoping I didn't drag you away from milking. No, your milking's in the morning, isn't it?
About midday, about 11 o'clock I start.
And we're doing this later on in the day, which is now dark because the clocks have just changed.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Miserable.
Anyway, thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you'd like to know more about the work I do, you can find me via my website, peytonprinciples.com, my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles Natural Health, where I have hundreds of videos, and on the usual LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.